Hey boys and girls. Hey boys and girls. Welcome to Cmsc 355. This is your host, David Shepard. David Shepard. I hope you're ready for a fun, and interesting Friday. Hey boys and girls. All right. Hope y'all are doing great. Hey boys and girls. We're gonna get started in just a minute. Until then, get logged into Minty and check it out. Let me know how you're feeling. It's that time of the semester. Hey boys and girls, welcome to Cmsc 3. This is your host. Welcome to Cmsc 355. This is your host, David Shepard. I hope you're ready for a fun and interesting Friday. David Shepard. Hey boys and girls. Hey boys and welcome to Cmsc 355. David Shep Friday. I hope you're ready for a fun and interesting Friday. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hope y'all are doing okay. This is the point in the semester that I just want to check in. We are all going through that crunch time in the semester. So I just thought I'd see. Hit me up in Minty. Let me know how you feeling. I want to take the pulse of the class. How are you feeling? Let me know. Hope you enjoyed my jam there. How are you feeling today? Let me know what's going down. It looks like at least a few of you are stressed and overwhelmed. It is that time of the semester, as you know. And yeah, we're all dealing with that. Somebody's already switching majors. Don't switch majors. That assignment that is due today is a hard one. I'm going to admit that's probably going to be one of your harder ones this semester. But, don't let it get you down. If you can't do everything, don't worry about it. Not going to kill your grade. You're still going to have a lot of chances to get that grade back up. All right, lots of responses in. A lot of people, feeling the stress of this time of semester. Yeah, I just want to encourage you. You're going to get through this. This one is a very hard assignment. It was hard even for me. That's why I gave y'all so many hints. But we got to go through some stuff that's going to push us if we want to be like real programmers. So not everything is going to be easy peasy. I remember when I was in school right here at VCU, absolutely my favorite class taught by our very own Dan Ressler, who's actually I think he's in electrical engineering or computer engineering now. He taught a compiler course, which was hard as heck. And I definitely stayed up maybe 2, maybe 3 nights over the course of the semester, all night to finish it. And it was really tough. However, that is the best class I took in undergrad, and it kind of pushed me to go on and go to grad school and to think about things more deeply. All right. Anyway, let's get moving. Today, we're going to be talking about testing. Just a few announcements first. The Xfig project is due tonight. We'll talk about that a little more in a second. And the Android app will be happening next week, so we're going to be switching back to that next week. In case you haven't got the vibe yet, we switch every other week. We kind of bounce back and forth between Xfig and Android, get you all a variety of experiences here. Okay? Now, I assume that you might have some questions about Xfig, given the reaction of people on Wednesday, as well as people in the chat, which I haven't been able to follow. So while I'm talking, I'll look at now. But hit me up in Minty if you have any questions, and I will do my best to get to you some answers. So let me know, what are your questions about Xfig that I can answer without telling you the answer, like, telling you every single line of code you got to write, but I can help you as much as I think I can, without, especially those of you that come to class, my favorite 42 of you that come to class. This one is going to be considered a project deliverable. This is a great question. This Coding Friday is considered a project deliverable. It's obviously a harder one. So in terms of grading goes, it's worth slightly more. Of course, there's lots of project deliverables and lots of in-class activities, and they're all worth roughly the same, but this one will be a project deliverable. So that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. Somebody also asked, is this a project or an assignment? We're going to call this a project deliverable, so it's worth slightly more, but not much more, so don't stress out too much. Somebody's asking, can you make it due on Monday at 3 a.m. without penalty? The late due date is already Monday at 3 a.m. and I will instruct my TAs to only take off like 2 points if you want to turn it in by then. So if you want extra time, that's fine. I'll only take off 2 points for late. So late, and turn it into Monday at 3 a.m. if you want to. I encourage you guys and gals not to work on the weekends if at all possible. I know that's not always possible, but I encourage you to work real hard during the week and not on the weekend. That's my personal preference, though. Somebody's asking for extra credit to make the Xfig button do the original task. Just changing the color with a single click. If you're able to get that far, please bring it to my attention. I'd like to see if anybody able to make it that far, really. So please bring it to my attention. I can almost guarantee that if you are able to do this kind of task, you're gonna get a good grade in this class anyway. But I guess I could give you extra credit. We'll see how many people make it there. Whenever I create a new class in Xfig, I have to do save as and then manually move it to the source file. I don't follow this question, but it might be because of where you have saved your files. Maybe you're not allowed to save files there unless you're an administrator. So just look into permissions and things like that. I don't know what computer you're on. I need more context to answer that question. When is the app actually due? Well, we are in a kind of a semester-long project. I assume you're talking about Android app. We're in a semester-long project that will result in you guys having an app and turning it in. At the end of the semester. However, I'm walking you through the different deliverables here, like do a sketch, do the first version, do the second version, just like you would in a real company. So I'm not going to tell you the answer to this question specifically, but I am going to always tell you like the next deliverable, the next sprint. I'm trying to focus you on the next sprint, just like you would in a normal company. Somebody's asking, when will we stop working on Xfig and start working on Android Studio? That's actually two different questions. The first question, when will we stop working on Xfig? Never. The second question, when will we start working on Android Studio? Next week, next Monday. Another question. Y'all got lots of questions today, which is excellent. I really appreciate the interactivity, even though we're going over the internet. It makes it a lot more fun if y'all are interactive. This question is, will we be given extra credit if we were able to complete the original instructions since it was much harder? If you're able to, two things. If you're able to complete the original instructions, you're probably already going to get an A in this class. But I would be willing to consider extra credit. So if you're able to do that, please let me know so I can take a look at it. Thank you. Somebody's asking, what does that mean for those of us who can't complete this task? If you can't complete this task, well, first of all, This is a task where you're working with a partner, right? This is a project deliverable. You can work with your partner. In case that wasn't clear to you, in any project deliverables, you can always work with your partner. So there's two of you, and that this kind of assumes that both of you have no idea what's going on. Um, so let's say that on average, at least one of the two may know what's going on. Um, if not, maybe talk to somebody else. And as long as they are not sending you files or touching your keyboard, uh, it is okay to talk to them and try and get hints from them and things like that. But you want to be able to understand it because this is the kind of thing that you would be asked to do on like a test. Not this hard, obviously, nowhere near this hard, but make a change to Xfig. So you want to understand how to do it. All right, but let's just say, like just for fun, that you couldn't do this task at all. You say, this is way too hard, and this is supposed to be a stretch goal task. This is just one project deliverable out of probably like about 10, right? So even if you completely flunk it, like it's not that big a deal. I mean, it's probably a few points on the final grade or something, right? So just do well in everything else and you'll be fine. You'll still probably get a B, if you're doing everything else. Is the Android app the final exam grade? The Android app is just a project grade, not a final exam. Somebody's asking, is the assignment due next week a working version of our app? The assignment due next week will be a 0.01 version of your app. That means it just needs to be a basic app, maybe with a splash screen, maybe like some basic stuff working, but not, obviously not expecting a whole lot from a first version of app. So kind of yes. The question here is, so both partners turn their own version in but work together. Remember, whenever you're working on any project deliverable, whether it's Xfig or Android, you only have to turn in one and you can work together on it. So you only need to turn in one video of you two working together to create a solution, okay? So one video per two people. Just one thing per two people for any project deliverable, including this one. Great question. Somebody's asking, these are great questions. Thanks again. Does the copy button need to randomly change to a new color or just to a new color that you choose? You can just choose any color as long as there is a color. It doesn't have to be randomly selected, just any color. I like pink. Somebody's asking, is the Fig assignment supposed to be done individually or with your partner? Again, great question. This is with your partner. Any project deliverables with your partner. Somebody's asking, if we have a question about how viable our app idea might be, could we meet with you and discuss it? Yes. To discuss scope and such. Yes. Absolutely. No problem. Somebody's asking, do we need to do anything with the fill style for it to work? So not just fill color. Yes, this is a great question, and this is the kind of thing that will help you along. So those of you that come to class, 50 of my best friends in this class that are here right now, you get an extra tip here. Yeah, I think I haven't implemented this myself, but what I believe you will need to do from using the app is that you will need to change the fill style to like solid and the fill color to blue or pink or whatever. Again, I recommend pink for this to work. Little tip. Somebody's asking, are you hyped for the new Metroid? I have no idea what you're talking about, but sounds cool. I hope you have fun over the weekend playing Metroid if it comes out. Somebody's asking, would you recommend a Git repo for Xfig or just the Android app? This is a great question. I love this question. In fact, I can't remember who it was. Maybe Brandon had a questions about that. So yeah, I think it was Brandon. So pay attention if you're Brandon. So remember when we were messing with stuff last week with Xfig, and some people had problems with their make files and they screwed it up, and then, oh no, like I screwed up my make file. What am I going to do now? If you were using a Git repo for Xfig, guess what you could do? Tell me in the chat, what could you do if you were using a Git repo to upload your code to for Xfig and you screwed up the make file beyond recognition, you could never get it to work again? What could you do to fix that situation? Roll back, go to former version, cry about it, also a good option. Who says programmers don't have emotions? So yes, you just go back to a previous version. You would just like, basically discard changes on your local repository, or if you had somehow committed those changes, you can roll back. So yeah, the easiest thing to do though would be to discard changes. Now you're going to want to start talking more precisely about Git operations. I noticed that nobody said discard changes, because things like that will be on a midterm, like, hey, if you screwed up a file, how do you fix it? I could just discard changes and it goes back to the way it was, okay? Hope that helps y'all. Do we need to show just proof that Xfig was done on one of our computers, or combine videos to show it was done on both computers? Well, if you're willing to give me a video montage of both computers, that sounds like it would be really fun. But you can just show me on one computer, and if it's only on one computer, maybe show me some other evidence of y'all working together, like both of you there going like this, or some screenshots of your chatting back and forth. That'd be great. Somebody's asking, is the color edit panel supposed to pop up before you drag and place down the new copy? Okay, so no. So I think that what they're asking here is, if you copy the thing, then your copy starts moving around the screen, as you remember. Do I want a color edit panel to pop up before you drag and place it? No, I don't, but if it does, that's okay. I'm not asking for that as part of the feature, but if that happens, that's okay. Somebody is excited about Metroid. Somebody's asking, is midterm on lockdown? I don't know what that means. I assume that means some kind of weird software solution. No, the way I tend to do midterms is it's a combination of questions, like knowledge questions, and computer actions that you will only be able to complete in a reasonable amount of time if you have your computer and your own computer set up in the proper way. Like you need to be able to compile Xfig, you need to be able to compile your own Android app, all on the computer that you're taking the test from. So I don't really care what computer you take it on. We're all going to take it at the same time, so it's going to be really hard for y'all to like help each other, because you're going to be really focused on getting your own midterm done in a timely manner. When I use, your own computers to do stuff, I have like kind of custom requirements that is just for you. And so your friend can't just send you a file that is the answer, right? So anyway, no, I don't use any weird software. I just use good old-fashioned time limits to kind of keep y'all as honest as possible. Somebody's asking, do both partners need to have this done on their version of Xfig for anything in the future? Or is it okay if just one person has it? If only one, it would be a better idea if both people had it. So figure out how to share it with each other. It would be a better idea if both people had it. Let me say that. I don't want to say too much, but let me say that. So it would be a very good idea if both people had it on a computer that was accessible to them. Somebody's asking, so that means the midterm is open book? Absolutely. All my exams are open book. Nobody goes to do software engineering with a closed book. So yes, open book. Somebody's asking, as people have asked before, because y'all love a study guide, do you have study guide for the midterm? Like, what should we review before taking the test? We will have probably a study day where we all like take a little quiz on Menti the day before the midterm. and that's how I like to review before taking the test. Gives you some things to think about and to get going and ready for the midterm. All right. Excellent questions. Thanks for your questions. Hopefully that cleared up things for a lot of y'all. We got to go on though. All right. So we talked about testing last time. We talked about unit testing and how to test with Android Studio and all that kind of stuff. Today, we're going to talk even more about testing because it turns out testing is a little more complicated than I let on before. We're going to have to talk about things like mocking, and we'll talk about, doing some legacy code testing. But we're just going to go a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole of testing. If you're going to be, let's say you're going to go be a tester, like a quality assurance person, you're going to go even deeper down this rabbit hole. If you're going to be a regular developer, though, you still have to know what things like mocking and stubbing and all those kinds of terms are, because you're going to encounter them in industry. Okay, so we're just going a little bit deeper into testing today, and it's things that you're going to need to know regardless of what kind of developer or person that tech person that you go and be. All right. Let's take a very quick overview of testing on Android. Here we go. Check it out.
In this video, I'm going to talk about the 3 different types of testing on Android. So that's going to be local unit tests, instrumentation tests, and UI tests. Before I start the presentation, let's take a look at Android Studio so I can show you something that you've probably seen before. So if you've spent any amount of time in Android Studio, you are probably very familiar with this view. You have the app directory expanded, you have the Java directory expanded, and inside that folder there that says COM, the one that has no kind of brackets on it, that's where you put your regular code. That's where you put your production code. But then what are these other two, the Android test and the test kind of directories? What are they for? What goes in there? And what is the difference between each one? So as I just said, there's 3 main types of testing on Android. The 3 types of testing are local unit tests, instrumentation tests, and UI tests. First, I'll talk about the local unit tests. Local unit tests are run on your local computer, so literally on the machine that has Android Studio installed on it. They are run using the Java Virtual Machine, or JVM for short. So it's run using the language Java on your computer. They're very fast because you don't need an emulator and you don't need anything to do with Android really to run them. Basically, it's just running raw Java code on your computer. These are the types of tests that you use to test your code logic. So that means like, what does this kind of method do? Does it do the right thing? Does this method throw an exception? Are there a sequence of methods and are they called in the correct order? That kind of thing. It's all logic based, raw Java code, logic based tests. Some of the mainstream libraries that probably 95% of people are going to use are JUnit and Mockito. JUnit 5 actually just came out recently, which is what I'm going to be building my newest course on, my unit testing course. And if you're curious about that unit testing course, keep watching this video and I'll tell you about it at the end. So now the next type of testing is instrumentation tests. Now these are very similar to local unit tests. You can think of them as almost the same with a little bit of difference. The instrumentation test can test Android specific functionality. That means functionality that uses things like activities, fragments, context, services, all this kind of lifecycle stuff that is strictly kind of unique to Android. Because sometimes when you're designing tests, you are testing classes that have access to, the application, context, activities, like I said. So that's where instrumentation tests come in handy. When you run instrumentation tests, you need to run them on a real device or on an emulator. And that's because they need the Android framework, like I said. Now there's some third-party libraries that will allow you to run these tests without an emulator or a real device, for example, RoboElectric, but sometimes they don't work perfectly. For example, JUnit 5, which is the newest version of JUnit, isn't compatible with RoboElectric, at least not yet. More than likely, it will be compatible eventually, just not right now. The mainstream libraries for instrumentation tests are the same for local unit tests. That's JUnit 5 and Mockito. However, since JUnit 5 just came out, There's still some Android specific dependencies that don't work perfectly with it, just like RoboElectric doesn't quite work perfectly with it. So for the instrumentation tests that I'm going to be doing in the course, I'm going to be using JUnit 4 instead of JUnit 5. So just to be clear, in the course, I'll be using JUnit 5 for the local unit tests, and I'm going to be using JUnit 4 for the instrumentation tests. Both are largely the same. There's just a few things related to the Android framework that aren't quite ready for JUnit 5. So the next type of testing is going to be UI testing, and this is the last sort of category of testing. UI tests are literally for simulating what a user might be doing with your application, whether that's, pressing buttons, entering text, or basically doing anything and everything possible that a user could do. Also, it does these things at speeds that a normal user might not even be able to do. So it might click a button faster than a user ever would or slower than a user ever would. If your UI is going to break your app, these tests will find that problem. Obviously, these UI tests need to be done using the Android framework because it's interacting with the UI, so you need a real device or an emulator to run these tests. These UI tests are done with Espresso, which is a library. If you open any Android project, you're going to see 3 directories inside the Java folder by default. One of these has nothing in brackets. That's going to be where your production code goes. The second has Android test in brackets, and the third has test in brackets. There's more than one test directory because different tests must be kept in different directories because they use different dependencies. And now I'm going to talk about which directory is used for what and which types of unit tests go in each directory. Just to give you kind of a better picture, here's what the directories are going to look like in Android Studio. You have the source directory, and then inside source is Android test, main, which is the main package directory, and then test. If you're confused about the main package, and you've never seen this before, because I know in Android Studio, I think I just showed like com was the main package, but it's just another view in Android Studio. So here, let me open Android Studio and show you. So earlier I was showing you the Android view, and what we had was com, which was the package name. Then you had Android test and test. But if we go to the project view from the pull down up here, we expand app, we go to source. Now you can see the real names of these directories. So it's Android test main, which is the main package directory, and test. So if you were confused about the presentation that I was just showing you, this is the view that I'm showing you here. There's Android test main, which is where your production code goes, and then there's test, which is for the local unit tests. So just remember, instrumentation tests and UI tests belong to the Android test directory. The test directory is for the local unit tests, and then main is where your production code goes with the main package directory. UI tests are done with Espresso. Instrumentation tests are done with Mockito and JUnit. Local unit tests are also done with Mockito and JUnit. So that's going to be it for this video. Remember, if you want to learn how to write professional grade unit tests and not just learn about which unit tests go in which directories, make an
All right, whatever. We don't care about your website, man. So check it out. We have just learned, again, we've reiterated some things, but we've also learned some new things about unit testing and instrumentation testing and UI testing, all in Android. But because I can't see you in person, I'm not always convinced that y'all are paying attention, and so I want to make sure that you're paying attention. I have a quiz. Get on in there, get into Minty. I'll give you another couple seconds to log in. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Here we go. When should you use a unit test? When should you use a plain old unit test? Well, when should you use a unit test? There may be more than one correct answer. Maybe just choose the most correct one. And you should have chose the most correct one for testing single methods. I can sympathize with those of you that said for integration or UI tests, because that is, you know, you will use, you can use unit tests for that. But when should you use a unit test? For testing a single method. Here we go, question 2. What is espresso for? Besides staying up all night and working on Xfig projects, what is espresso for? Thinking of a framework. It is espresso. Yep, you're right, it is espresso, but it is for UI test. UI test, that's great. Let's see who's ahead so far. All right, Adam is our leader right now, followed by Agent X9, Nathan, Benji, Buckets, Waluigi, Big Joe, Scar, Henry, and V. Question 3 of 5. What folder holds the UI test? What folder holds the UI test? Is it UI test, test, Android test, or test it? That's right, Android test, most of you know. Question 4 or 5. To run a test in an emulator, you should use a funky test, an instrumental test, an integrated test, a unit test, or an instrumented test. To run a test in an emulator, you should use a funky one, an instrumental one, an integrated one, a unit test, or an instrumented test. Instrumented, guys and gals, and everybody out there, instrumented. Sometimes it pays to take your time and read all the answers. All right, Brandon's our new leader. Let's see. This is the last question. What runs everything but the UI test? What runs everything but the UI test? Magic, Espresso, Makito, JUnit, and Tableau. That's right, JUnit pretty much does it all. And it looks like Brandon's gonna be our winner, followed by Waluigi. I can't see some other people. Way to go, y'all. Way to go. Okay. Why? I want to ask y'all some further questions. Some kind of write in your own answers questions. Why would you want instrumented test? Why would you want to do instrumented test? Gotcha. All right, instrumented tests are good for making sure your code works within the context of the Android framework. You might want to make sure that you create a date in the Android framework. You want to make sure it interacts correctly with the calendar, or you create an event. You want to make sure that it gets actually put on the calendar. You want to make some noise or make things buzz on your phone. You want to test things where your app interacts with the Android framework. So to make sure it's working on the system. And another great point, because apps that aren't actually optimized for the device are crap, somewhat crudely put, but definitely right, is if they don't test it on the real app, then it is usually not a very fun app on the real phone. If they don't use it on the real phone, it's not a very fun app to use, right? All right, great answers. Thank you. Now, what would you call an instrumented test from a theoretical point of view? There's several different um, kind of theoretical types of tests. I'm not going to tell you what they are because that will give you the answer, but what would you call an instrumented test from a theoretical point of view? Not many people know this, huh? All right, so this is painful, so I'll just give you guys the answer. You could call it. There's a couple things you could call it, and I would consider it correct. You could call it a system test because you're testing kind of the whole system, or you could call it an integration test because you're testing, your code's integration again with the Android system. I would probably call it a system test, um, but either of those I would have accepted. Now, in contrast to that kind of test, again, unit or functional testing test the functionality of just a few things in isolation. Um, this is just to contrast with things like acceptance test or acceptance testing, where the user is going to use something and say, "Yeah, this does what I thought it was going to do." A unit or functional test is just going to test maybe one method or one subpart of that overall thing that's going to happen. One of the problems with trying to create unit tests is you have to isolate the logic of that test from all the surrounding code, like the buttons and the Android framework and everything else. And to do that in a clean way, we might have to sometimes create things that are called test doubles, or basically classes that help us write a test without, for instance, running the entire Android framework. So the point is we want to replace an object with a test double, okay? And we want to do that when the real object is too slow, it's not available because we're not running a certain framework, or it's just such a pain to instantiate. Can anybody give me an example of a class that we might want to replace with a test double if we were writing test? There is at least one canonical example here that is really, straightforward to guess. There's lots of things that could be a test double. What is an example of a class that might be a good thing to offload to a test double? Let me know in the chat. Hey boys and girls. Hey boys and girls. All right. The user, not really. I mean, maybe kind of something that requires Wi-Fi. That sounds like it might be legit. Or a database. A database is like the canonical example here. Let's say you have a huge database, and you want to test something that's not really related to the actual like database, some kind of just basic logic. instead of instantiating that whole database and getting all the credentials and all that stuff, maybe you use a double instead. Okay, so we're just going to go through a quick example, but the idea, again, at a high level is you don't want to instantiate all this stuff. You just want to have like a fake class that allows you to create a test, and get on with your life. So, for instance, here is an example of a time that we want to have test a click counter. Okay, and normally you have to send on click, which we're trying to test, a button, right? And so we need a button to pass this method right here. And so we're trying to write this test, and we're like, oh man, how do I call this thing? I don't have a button. If you pass it null, it gets angry at you. So what are we going to do? We can, if we wanted to, instantiate the whole Android framework and, use find view by ID and get a button. But, that's a giant pain in the butt. What we might want to do is just create a fake button. Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So this is kind of a set of solutions, creating mock objects, creating stubs, creating mocks. All of these things are meant that we're going to create objects and classes that aren't really doing anything, and they aren't really the real classes, but they allow us to get on with our life and write the test. So dummy objects like the one we were just talking about right here, we could create a dummy object that's just used to fill a parameter list. Stubs are methods that kind of override an existing class and just provide canned answers. So you might want to do that with a database, have a database that just always returns the same answer. It doesn't actually interact with a database, it's just a simple one. And mocks are objects that record some behavior that you want to assert later. So these are just some things I want you to know about. We're not going to try and go deep into this rabbit hole. As I said, this can be a bit of a rabbit hole when you're programming, but sometimes you're going to want to write tests, and these are some tools if you find yourself having trouble writing a test. Some libraries that you're going to want to know about is JMock, EasyMock, Mockito. Costa thinks that Mockito has the nicest syntax, Costa Cmsc. And all you got to do to use these things is add a line in your Gradle build script, right? Just basically add the dependency to your project, and then you can use them. For instance, you could create a button very simply in this way, mockito.mock button.class. So now you have a button that you can pass in here, and everything's good. You can test and do your assertion without actually instantiating the whole thing. So this is basically a dummy. This is functioning as a dummy class. You can also, Mockito can also provide stubs and mocks. So for instance, let's look at this real quick. Here we have a mockito.mock, that class. We have that version of the class, and we can set up some kind of rules like when that test has the getUniqueID method called, it will return 43. So we are kind of telling that test how to behave. And then later on, when we do test.getUniqueID, it will actually always return 43. That makes sense. Another thing you can do is you can spy on real objects. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but I just want you to know it can be used to spy on real objects. If you want to look into this a little bit deeper, I just wanted you to be aware that this is a thing you can do. However, this is not something that I necessarily recommend you do. It's just something that you can do. And I wanted you to be aware of it. I'm going to move on because I don't want to want you to think I recommend this that much. All right. So just a few guidelines of making testable designs. If you want to like make your design easier to test, you should consider composition over inheritance. What does that mean? Well, if you have a huge tree of inheritance, like everything inherits from object, which, and then all of those things are like a program object and a program class, and then all those things are a subclass of that, and all those things are a subclass of that. It gets really complicated to do mocking when you have an intense class hierarchy. Okay, what would be better is if you just had like objects that had other classes inside of them, or were composed of other class. So like a person who is composed of a name, an address, and a telephone number, where the name, address, and telephone number are all objects of their own. Okay. You always want to avoid static and singleton things if at all possible, because these are hard to double. And you do want to avoid those anyway, because they're kind of similar to global variables. You don't want a lot of like singletons and global things lying around. That's just not going to be good coding practice. Okay, so I wanted to give y'all an idea of what this stuff is, but I don't want to spend too much time on it or go too deep, because you can do too much. I personally recommend like basic unit test, a lot of basic unit test, and then probably UI test is your next thing. You don't want to overuse these mock objects, because it can make tests harder to understand. It can, as I think, who said that? Wang was saying that it can make tests harder to maintain, and I agree with that. Can also, these tests that use mocks don't provide as much assurance as if they were using real objects that your code is working properly. So they are kind of limited value, right? Like they are tests, but they're not as good as regular unit test or regular UI or instrumented test. So I encourage you to just be aware of this technology, use it if you have to, but don't lean on it too much, because then you can cause yourself a lot of problems later on. All right, just a quick question to ask. What do y'all think about doubles in testing? Love them, hate them, never seen them before, gonna use them all the time, gonna never use them? Let me know. What do you think? I don't know what busing is. I know what I'm still confused is. Somebody has never seen it, but now you have. And now when somebody says mocks, you know what they are. They're probably bad, but they're not always bad. Like you will need them sometimes. So they're not like bad all the time for sure. Some people saying I will avoid mocks, but again, not all the time. They can be helpful. You can use them and they can help you actually write some tests. So don't just avoid them for, yeah, here I like the answer, useful for some circumstances. Just like a good craftsman, you need to know all the available tools so that when you reach a certain circumstance, for instance, that mocks are available. You don't want to use them all the time. You don't want to get obsessed, but you want to use them sometimes. Somebody said floats are cooler. Okay. I do like floats. Somebody said it's like a twin. Yeah, I like that. It's a digital twin. Just a buzzword from a few years ago. All right, great. So I want to just say a few brief words about legacy code and testing. That legacy code's everywhere. Guess what? Xfig is a great example of legacy code. You guys are having to use Xfig, and Xfig, to my knowledge, doesn't have any tests, or if it does, they're hidden really well because I haven't seen them. So because this legacy code is everywhere and it doesn't have tests, then what do you do in this kind of case? Um, you can either write a bunch of tests before you do anything, or you can just carry on. For the purpose of this class, we're just going to carry on, of course, with Xfig. But in general, if you were going to work on a real legacy program, especially one that was still used in production, you'd want to write some test at least to ensure that you didn't break it. Okay. You could call these tests characterization tests. They basically help you know what is going on with this software and make sure you understand, for instance, how it works. And if you make changes and these tests start failing, that can be a key indicator that maybe you should stop making that particular change or you shouldn't commit it. And so I just want to say, when you're making tests, when you're working with legacy code, you got to be careful. They often don't have tests, but you will often have to write at least a few tests to make sure when you make changes, you don't break them. All right, just a quick word about a bit of research on testing. There are approximately 200 billion lines of active COBOL code, processing 75% of the world's business data and 90% of financial transactions. In addition, several billion lines of new COBOL are added every year, and IBM estimates that more than 30 billion transactions occur within COBOL programs every day. To put this in perspective, Google averages only about 6 billion searches per day. So, COBOL, a language which to my knowledge doesn't even have some kind of unit testing framework, is doing a ton of the world's work. And this is just to know that testing is good and very important, but people have written software without tests before, and it's out there, and you're going to have to work with it. So if you go into the field at your age and you go into the field, you're going to have to write tests. And you're going to have to write tests for old systems. And you don't want to pass on a legacy that is like this to the next generation. Imagine if you had to go in and work with COBOL that has, is doing very important things like this, like bank transactions, but has no test. That's a giant pain. You don't want to leave that kind of legacy to the next generation of coders, like the generation before left to us. Now, they have an excuse a little bit because they were at the dawn of the computer age, and so they didn't really maybe know any better, but we do know better, and we know how important testing is. If you create systems without test, and you're out there in the working world, let's say in the next 5 years, and I find you, I'll be pissed. All right. Oops. That's all that I wanted to say to y'all today. We just wanted to talk about tests, different types of tests, UI testing, instrumented tests, which we've already talked about, unit tests, which we've already talked about. I'm going to talk a little bit about things like mocks and stubs and dummy objects, test doubles, really. I wanted you to know that those exist, but I wanted to not go into the details of, for instance, SPY. So if you're into that one, for instance, go check it out online. That's one of the concepts I didn't want to get too deep into because it's not a necessary one and it's not one that I recommend. Great question, though. Appreciate the enthusiasm. Go check it out. Now, I just wanted you to know that those things exist so that when you're out there working in the field, if you run into a situation where you're writing a test and you can't complete it because you need an object, then you know about mocks and stubs and doubles and things like that. All right, that's it for today. I'm going to answer a few questions and then we're out of here. Somebody's asking, can we make a group of 50 and submit together, please? No way. Groups of 2. What's the very first thing we should do when starting to build our app? Just get a basic splash screen up and running and a basic activity and make sure you have a repository, things like that. And looks like that's all the questions that I see for today. I'll hang around for another second in case you got more questions. Otherwise, I will see y'all on Monday. Friday. Fun, and interesting. David Shepard. Hey boys and girls. Hey boys and girls. I am a spy. I hope you're fun, interesting. I hope you're fun, interesting. David. Hey boys and girls. Great question. If you join a team that writes unit tests in JUnit, you would write tests in JUnit. Absolutely. Somebody's asking, do you drop the lowest grade? I do drop the lowest grade of class activities, but not of projects. Sorry. Somebody's asking, for the Xfig assignment, does the copy and fill have to work with all possible shapes or just a rectangle? Just a rectangle would be fine. Remember, I don't want a 20-minute video. I just want like a 30-second video, so you're only going to have time to show one shape anyway. So one shape would be fine. Great question. Hey boys and girls. Welcome to Cmsc 355. Fun, interesting, fun, and interesting. Friday. All right, looks like that's it for questions. Hope you all have a great weekend and good luck with Xfig. Take it easy.